Purging the Opposition. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Welcome, everyone. This podcast is called Purging the Opposition. And typically we have a dumbest bill in America or a go woke or go broke segment. We're going to resume those very soon since so many of the state legislatures are back in session, as well as city councils, as well as the federal government. We have lots of material to bring you in soon to be produced podcasts. But this podcast is called Purging the Opposition. And first up, AOC says she doesn't feel safe around Republicans. AOC, of course, she goes on CNN, naturally CNN. She'll never go on Fox. But she goes on CNN with Chris Cuomo, who asks her a bunch of leading questions, as you would expect. And she's so concerned about her safety in the Capitol because there are Republicans in the Capitol. I can't believe it. It's really hysterically funny to see this individual constantly get media attention. And obviously she has, millions of followers on Twitter and other social media platforms. But people actually want to hear what she has to say and actually believe her when she says it, which is one of the reasons why we talk about AOC, because much of what she says is really quite dangerous, if not stupid, such as she doesn't feel safe around Republicans. So CNN's Chris Cuomo asks AOC, why didn't you attend the Biden inauguration? And we have a clip on that, and here it is.
Metaphor for the promise of this country. You knew that people would ask why you weren't there. This was a good cause from your perspective of dealing with your constituency, but this was supposed to be a show of force and unity, and you weren't there. Explain it.
Yeah, I think we also had very real security concerns as well, as you mentioned earlier. We still don't yet feel safe.
Yes, there you have it. AOC, we, meaning the Democrats, still don't feel safe around other members of Congress because they're Republicans. And, Republicans are just dangerous people to be around. Look, when you have a republic and people are elected in their respective districts and they go to the House of Representatives, they actually have to represent the people in their district. And if you want to get legislation passed and you want to get meaningful things done for the American people, and obviously depending on your position, whether you're conservative or in AOC's case, an outright socialist, depending on what you want to get done, you have to actually work with people, hopefully people of like mind in certain issues across the aisle. And yes, that is true. On certain issues, there are people across the aisle that may actually agree with you on certain issues. Obviously, with AOC, she is the ultimate ideologue, and she agrees with nothing that Republicans do because she doesn't even feel safe around them. So how could she even work with them? So how many members don't feel safe? That's what Chris Cuomo asks. Good old CNN's Chris Cuomo asks that of AOC. How many members don't feel safe? Like how many Democrat members? Doesn't ask how many Republican members don't feel safe. How many Democrats don't feel safe when they're in the House chamber or the House of Representatives? And we have that clip, and here it is.
How many are we?
I think a very considerable amount. A lot of members do not.
You really
feel safe.
think that colleagues of yours in Congress may do you dirty?
Yeah, well, one just tried to bring a gun on the floor of the House today. I believe it was Representative Andy Harris of Maryland. He tried to bring in a gun onto the House floor. For individuals who don't know, guns are not allowed in the District of Columbia, and certainly the House floor is there are separate House rules that prohibit the bringing in of firearms.
So first of all, what kind of real reporter, like what kind of hard news reporter, even a soft news reporter, would use the term "do you dirty"? So Chris Cuomo, so you think that other members of Congress, like on the opposite side of the aisle, namely Republicans, are going to do you dirty? Who says that? And this is considered to be like part of the mainstream media, like serious media in the United States, CNN, which obviously it isn't. But Chris Cuomo asks the question anyway, and AOC says, well, let me give you an example. Andy Harris, who's a Republican congressman from Maryland, came to the House chamber, if not the House of Representatives, and had a concealed carry weapon on him. I presume, and I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it's the case. Andy Harris has a license to carry, and I'm sure he does. And he came into the House chamber. But here's what's interesting. AOC doesn't feel safe on the House floor because initially it was because of, as she says it, the insurrection, and because of the fact that, she also thinks we should defund the police. So no wonder she doesn't feel safe, because on the one hand, she wants to defund the police, but on the other hand, when the police are there to help her and save them from these folks who are coming in as a mob inside the Capitol, and of course, looking to wreak havoc inside the Capitol, she suddenly loves the police. But when it comes to a Republican who also wants to feel safe and therefore brings a gun inside, which is has a concealed carry weapon, and I presume has the legal right to carry it, and brings it into the House of Representatives or the House of Representatives chamber, I'm not sure which, because I've read numerous articles that are conflicting on this matter, she doesn't feel safe because, he might, use it against her? I think not, okay? I really think not. Because look, the last time there was an attack on members of Congress, as I recall, was when it was a crazed Democrat who shot up a bunch of Republican congressmen when they were playing softball in the annual, Republican versus Democrat softball game. And that happened in Virginia. So it's really interesting how, on the one hand, AOC doesn't want anyone to have guns and also wants to defund the police. But as soon as she feels threatened, she tries to naturally politicize it and say it's got to be the Republicans who are doing that, completely and utterly ignoring what happened all of 2020, namely all the infidels, if you want to call them, who are in the streets of New York and Chicago and Portland, Oregon, and Seattle. And what were they doing? They were burning, pillaging, raping, and killing, and they were all the people on the left. They were Antifa, and they were BLM. So Cuomo has a follow-up question about Andy Harris. Of course, Congressman Andy Harris is a Republican congressman from Maryland who did indeed bring a gun onto the House floor or into the House of Representatives. I'm not sure. As I said, I've read numerous articles, and they are somewhat conflicting, and there is an ongoing investigation about this. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, if you're in the 21st century, if you are a congressman or a congresswoman, it's not a bad idea to kind of arm yourself, because there are some pretty crazy people out there, but not according to AOC. So Chris Cuomo of CNN has a follow-up question about Andy Harris, and we have that clip, and here it is.
Why does a member of Congress need to sneak a gun onto the House floor?
Do you think they're bringing it in there because they want to protect all of you from, insurrectionists like we saw a couple of weeks ago? Or do you think there really is a chance that you may be the enemy?
Well, here's what I'll say. The moment you bring a gun onto the House floor in violation of rules, you put everyone around you in danger. It is irresponsible, it is reckless, but beyond that, it is in violation of rules. You are openly disobeying the rules that we have established as a community, which means that you cannot be trusted to be held accountable to what we've decided.
So, Chris Cuomo, did you hear what he said? He literally asked AOC, so you think that the reason Congressman Harris brought a gun into the House of Representatives is because he might want to use it against you or other members of Congress that are on the opposite aisle? That's absurd. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous, and it is so irresponsible. Quite frankly, if you want to wonder why the temperature in the United States is at such a record high level, right? And you have this sense of immense unrest that is just seething. It's because of these idiots who work at CNN, like Chris Cuomo, who ask these incredibly stupid questions, and then almost themselves are trying to incite things based on complete mistruths, okay? What they should do is ask Andy Harris for a statement and read the statement. Or read Andy Harris's statement, because I have no doubt that he probably put one out. And then if you want to ask AOC, fine. But it's always one way. And you just got to expect more of that, because after all, it's 2021, it's 2020 all over again. And that's AOC. She says she doesn't feel safe around Republicans. So next up, podcast listeners, AOC wants to expel everyone. Everyone. AOC wants to expel everyone from Congress. So Chris Cuomo of CNN asks AOC, what if the Senate delays the Trump impeachment? What if the Senate delays it? It's not like right away, like the way the House did it, where the House didn't have any kind of findings of fact or any kind of hearings about Donald Trump and what they called the insurrection, and that fact that, as they see it, Donald Trump was completely and utterly responsible for it. Of course, again, the House of Representatives just decided to impeach him, but AOC wants the Senate to do the same thing. They want to what? Remove him from office? He's no longer in office. But nonetheless, Chris Cuomo asks AOC the question, what happens if the Senate of the United States decides to delay the trial of Donald Trump? We have that clip, and here it is.
Hey, if they want to delay it, let's bring up a vote to expel Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley from the Senate.
You think they should be out?
Because if we've got time on our hands, then we should be actually bringing justice to the members of Congress and the members of the Senate who also help support this insurrection.
You think they should be out?
Let's not. They absolutely, if they don't resign, they should be expelled.
Zero
from the
chance
Senate.
they resign. Nobody resigns.
Then we should hold the vote.
So AOC says Josh Hawley and Senator Ted Cruz, two United States senators, should resign because they happen to be objectors in the United States Senate. So, she wants to just expel everyone from Congress. And if that's not enough, the Chris Cuomo also asked her, well, how about in the House of Representatives? You told us who you want to expel in the Senate, but how about in the House? Do tell. We have that clip, and here it is.
I know we have an ethics inquiry coming up in the House. If an investigation bears out that Representatives Mo Brooks or representatives, for example, other representatives that were there that day, were in fact collaborating with these insurrectionists that led to the deaths of 5 people, they have no place in the House of Representatives either.
What about just voting to decertify the election on the basis of polls or what they had heard may have happened?
Well, I think that there should be consequences for attempting to overturn our elections. And these investigations are bearing out, and we will see to the full extent what we know from the facts of it. But there are other consequences as well. People often say that the House is about relationships. And when Democrats have a majority, there's also the question of, even if members don't get expelled, do you really want to co-sponsor legislation with a member who doesn't even believe in the veracity of their own election?
So AOC, of course, wants to have members of the House of Representatives who have objected to the certifying of elections in certain states, not all states. She wants to have them expelled, or she wants members who are Democrats to not even work with them whatsoever. So in other words, isolate them so they can't get anything done, which is what Democrats do anyway when they're in charge of the House of Representatives. It's not like the Republicans have any kind of power whatsoever, because the Democrats control all of the committee processes, and they also control the legislative process. So nothing's going to happen that Democrats don't want anyway. But AOC, that's never enough. She wants to just expel them all, get rid of them, because they did what? They happen to have a principled position in certain states and in certain instances where they believed there was potential election fraud, right? And felt as though that things just didn't seem right. So here's some proof, right? We're going to talk this through. So here's CNN's Pamela Brown interviewing the newly elected Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina. So Madison Cawthorn is the youngest member of the United States Congress. I believe he's either 25 years old or 26. You have to be 25 years old anyway to be in the House of Representatives, according to the United States Constitution. And nonetheless, he got elected. So he's the youngest member of Congress. He's a Republican from North Carolina. His name is Madison Cawthorn. And he is asked by Pamela Brown about his open letter to the United States Congress and the House of Representatives about how he wants to work across the aisle. And so listen to CNN's asymmetric questioning. Ideal. Here it is.
The letter says that you aim to, quote, rise above the partisan fray. Yet you are one of 138 Republicans who voted to decertify the election results. You actually did that even after the January 6 riots. So how does that help you reaching your goal of reaching across the aisle and working with the Biden administration?
Well, I'll tell you, as despicable as the events on January 6th were, it didn't actually affect my thought process on objecting to the election. You see, I wasn't objecting to President Biden himself, and I wasn't doing it on behalf of President Trump. I was doing it on behalf of the Constitution. I think in six key swing states, particularly in Wisconsin, you can see that the state legislature, who is the sole body that is supposed to dictate the law that circumvents and is around all of our election laws, was circumvented. They subverted the state legislatures there, and I believe that's a constitutional infraction.
All Madison Cawthorn said was that he had an issue with what had happened in Madison, Wisconsin, and certain other states where there were some election irregularities. And in particular, his point was, what about those ballot drop boxes? Okay, so CNN's Pamela Brown asked, well, please give some specifics. You know, it's just not enough to just have some sort of generality. Give us some specifics. So Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina, the youngest member of Congress, does just that. And we have that clip, and here it is.
What are some specific examples that informed this bold decision, this audacious decision, even after the riots, to decertify the results? You must have seen some concrete evidence.
Well, Pam, the things that I was not objecting to the election on behalf of was things like Dominion voting machines changing ballots, or these U-Haul trucks pulling up filled with ballots for Joe Biden as president. The thing I was objecting for is things like I said, in the state of Wisconsin, particularly in the town of Madison, there was an appointed official in that town who actually went against the will of the state legislature and created ballot drop boxes, which is basically ballot harvesting that was happening in the parks.
But this was all litigated. You know that the Trump campaign litigated all of this, more than 60 cases, and they lost.
So CNN's Pamela Brown isn't the least bit interested in talking about the substantive part of the problem with the election. She wants to talk about the legal part, right? Well, they were litigated, and since they were litigated and Trump didn't win, therefore, well, by the way, that particular case wasn't litigated because the courts basically dismissed it. And you have to ask yourself the question, what about the actual principle of ballot harvesting and drop boxes? So let's talk that through for a minute, because this is exactly what Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina is talking about. So in Madison, Wisconsin, of course, you have these drop boxes. They're not mailboxes run by the USPS. These are actually drop boxes that are separate, that might look like mailboxes somewhat and be built in the same or similar way, but they are owned by the election board. The election board puts them out across the city, and in theory, what's supposed to happen is when you finish filling out your mail-in ballot at home, you drive to a drop box, because, you know, after all, you might get COVID if you actually drive to the election board or vote on the day of the election. And so you drive to the drop box, and then you put your ballot inside the drop box. Except that that's generally not the full story. What actually ended up happening is that, yes, you had some individuals who dropped just their ballot, but you had many, many more who had their ballots harvested. In other words, people went door to door, knocked on their door and said, hey, you got a ballot? Great. Oh, you don't want to fill it out? Fine, I'll fill it out for you. And then I'll go ahead and drop it into the drop box. That's called ballot harvesting. You're harvesting ballots like you're harvesting corn. And you're doing it, and with ballots, of course, that's illegal, because the only ballot you should ever touch, ever, is yours. Ever. And instead, you know, Madison decided that they're going to run this election this way, and we know that that opens the door for cheating, because you interrupt the chain of custody of a ballot as soon as you have ballot drop boxes. That is what Madison Cawthorn of North Carolina was talking about. Except CNN's Pamela Brown has no interest whatsoever. No interest in talking about this, the substance of the issue. She's talking about the legal part. Well, because he failed in court, therefore there can't be any possible fraud in Madison, Wisconsin, or any other place for that matter where they had massive drop boxes. And so how is that related to AOC wants to expel everyone? It has everything to do with it, because AOC would talk to Chris Cuomo, and you heard those clips, and she's saying, well, every member of the House of Representatives who objected to the election, no matter how narrow they objected, to which states, or objected in general principle, they should be expelled from the House of Representatives, or they should be censured in some way, or they should be isolated and never allow any of their legislation to come out. And yet, you have another example of Pamela Brown of CNN asking Madison Cawthorn about the drop boxes, and she's not interested in talking through the problems that these drop boxes create. Instead, it's just hit jobs on members of Congress who happen to be Republicans. So you have to ask yourself the question, when these kinds of interviews happen, and by the way, kudos to Madison Cawthorn for going on CNN anyway, because obviously that takes a lot of guts, because right away it's always going to be a hit job. But you always have to ask yourself the question, at what point will the mainstream media ever really be interested in actually talking through in an intelligent way and providing a full scope of the possibilities that could happen? So if you're an objector about what happened in Madison, Wisconsin, and you really take a principled position that drop boxes are problematic, which they are, everybody knows it, then according to AOC, you need to be expelled. And that, of course, shows us that there's no interest in the Democrat Party of ever fixing this problem properly. They're going to just continue, if anything, pushing the envelope to make it worse and worse. And that's AOC, wants to expel everyone. Next up, podcast listeners, we have NBC wants to end the filibuster. That's right. Good old NBC is actually advocating to end the filibuster. And you have to listen closely to why I think that NBC wants to end the filibuster as a news organization. So here's Chuck Todd of NBC. If you ever watched Chuck Todd, you will know he's probably one of the most corrupt reporters in American television and in the American newsrooms, without question, because Chuck Todd, he always has those leading questions, and he has an agenda every time he's running his program. You can say, well, he's doing it for ratings. Doesn't matter. It's not real news. Nonetheless, Chuck Todd asks Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois about ending the filibuster now that the Democrats are in charge of the United States Senate. We have the first clip on that where Chuck Todd has that leading question. Let's end the filibuster. Listen closely and see how excited he is about this. Here's the clip.
So I want to get to the filibuster now. There's a lot of progressive groups that have no patience on this filibuster debate, and I know you guys are going to get inundated with some ads that are already on social media. Here's one we're putting up. The time has come. Here, it looks like a movie trailer, and they quote Barack Obama saying Jim Crow relic, AOC calling it a cherished tool of segregationists, and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid saying it's outlived its usefulness. Do you have a point in time? Where are you on this filibuster question? And is there a point where you're going to say, you know what, I've tried long enough?
Well, I think it gets down to the bottom line here. The American people want us to take action on this pandemic, action on this economy, and on a host of other issues. And if this filibuster has now become so common in the Senate that we can't act, that we just sit there helpless, shame on us. Of course we should consider a change in the rule under those circumstances.
So the filibuster, what is it? Of course. So just to remind you, the filibuster is the rule in the Senate that says that you need 60 votes in order to end a debate. So if you have a debate, of course, on the Senate floor about a COVID stimulus bill, you would actually need 60 United States senators to say, okay, this debate about this particular bill can now end. And at which point, then you have a vote, and it takes 51 senators to pass that particular stimulus bill. So really, because it takes 60 votes to end debate, it means that it takes 60 votes to really pass a bill, right? Because you can't even get to the point where you vote until you actually end the debate. That's really an important point. So why is that the case? Why is that a rule in the United States Senate? Well, it's a rule, and it has been a rule in the United States Senate because of the fact that it is the traditional cooling off body. Crazy legislation routinely gets passed out of the House of Representatives. It moves to the United States Senate, and the United States Senate says, okay, you need 60 votes to pass this bill. So we're going to cool things off, slow it down, have a debate, and the debate's going to be a long time so that senators can negotiate and compromise and if they don't, of course, you're not going to ever get the 60 votes. according to the Senate rules, and that would be the filibuster. And once you end the debate, then you can go and vote for the bill, then it only takes 51 votes. So, of course, now that the Democrats are in charge, they want to end that filibuster. And NBC News is so excited. Chuck Todd is so excited about getting rid of this filibuster. It's really kind of, disgusting because it is such a dangerous thing to get rid of. Because when you don't have a cooling off body in a republic, what you have is mob rule. And mob rule never ends well and never has throughout history. So, good old Chuck Todd says, well, Harry Reid, says give it a couple of months before you actually decide to see how things go, before you actually get rid of the filibuster. And if you recall, Senator Harry Reid was from Nevada, of course, United States Senator, and he actually got rid of the filibuster in certain very narrow votes, right? And so he kind of started the process of getting people to think along the lines of getting rid of the filibuster. And so good old Chuck Todd says, well, hey, Harry Reid says, give it a couple of months. Dick Durbin has a response to that. We have that clip, and here it is.
Harry Reid, in fact, suggests giving it a couple of months. Would you I've almost wondered, when Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell negotiating, are you willing to say, okay, we won't do it for 6 months. Let's see how you behave?
Well, let me answer your question by citing another thing. We're trying to pass an organizing resolution. You know what that's all about, so that the committees can get down to business. And what Chuck Schumer put on the table was word for word the bipartisan agreement the last time we had a 50-50 Senate. And Senator McConnell came back and said, no, I want absolute protection. The filibuster will not be touched. Well, that's a non-starter, because if we gave him that, then the filibuster would be on everything every day. So here's the bottom line. If we are going to work in a bipartisan fashion, let's pass the organizing resolution without the extra McConnell language.
So that is limiting, essentially Harry Reid saying initially, just wait a couple of months, see how it goes, and then you can really jam stuff through. And Dick Durbin saying, well, we have an organizing resolution. Well, the organizing resolution it's basically a resolution of the rules in the Senate, how things work at the committee level, and once you're on the floor, and of course, debating particular bills. And so Dick Durbin's point is, well, we have a filibuster already. Let's just see if the Republicans are trying to be obstructionists before we actually move forward. So as you can see, Dick Durbin's being very careful. Why is that? Because Durbin knows what happens. It doesn't go well. It doesn't go very well at all when you have a filibuster that no longer exists, because you just jam this crazy stuff down through the Senate. And of course, since you have Biden, Biden's not going to veto any of this stuff because we know who's in charge. Barack Obama's in charge of the White House without question. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to jam through bringing D.C. in as a statehood and expanding the courts and packing the courts without question. So Joe Manchin of West Virginia is in a super red state, and he actually has said that he does not support ending the filibuster. Well, if you have a 50-50 vote in the United States Senate, because Kamala Harris is the tie-breaking vote as Vice President of the United States, but you have Senator Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat from West Virginia, but from an incredibly red state, and he's saying, I do not want to end the filibuster, then I think there's a good chance, hopefully, we can only cross our fingers, that Joe Manchin will do the right thing. My personal opinion is Joe Manchin would be best served if he changed parties to Republican anyway, because there is no way he's getting reelected from the state of West Virginia as a Democrat. He was fortunate enough last time to get elected. He's not going to get reelected, so he would be better off, I think, in my opinion, changing parties. Although you could also make the argument that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia is also one of the most powerful members of Congress now, because of the fact that he holds that swing vote in his hand of the United States Senate at such time when bills do come to the floor and you need that 51st vote. He's the guy. So he has an incredible amount of power. But this idea of ending the filibuster and saying that it is a relic of Jim Crow is just so insulting. It really is, because if you don't understand the dangers of not having a cooling off body in the United States Senate, especially with the craziness that's coming from the left right now, where they essentially want to gut the entire republic and turn it into a direct democracy where the mob rules and cities basically control, all the votes. And if you live in the countryside, good luck. It's just too dangerous. And it's a shame that we even have a news organization like NBC trying to end the filibuster. So that's Chuck Todd wants to end the filibuster. So next up, podcast listeners, Dominion Voting Systems is suing Rudy Giuliani for defamation. That's right. Good old Dominion, that company that makes those voting systems that happen to be in all of the swing states. What a coincidence. Or at least most of the swing states. They are suing Rudolph Giuliani because they think that he defamed them when he was talking about their voting systems and the integrity of their voting systems. So once again, we have CNN that's reporting about this. Of course, lack of critical thinking and lack of critical questions, not possible. So we had the first clip up from CNN reporting about it, and here it is.
Breaking news. Dominion Voting Systems has filed a $1.3 billion lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani for defamation after he and others spread the false conspiracy theory that the company's machines flip votes from Trump to President Biden. This is a taste of the type of thing that Giuliani was saying. Listen.
Last night, one of the experts that has examined these crooked Dominion machines has absolutely what he believes is conclusive proof that in the last 10%, 15% of the vote counted, the votes were deliberately changed.
So that's, of course, Rudy Giuliani talking about post-campaign, post-election, about how he believes that votes were flipped from one candidate to the other. Well, actually, that did end up happening in Michigan, by the way. There was one county in Michigan. There may have been a second, but there was one county in particular in Michigan where there were votes that, for whatever reason, were flipped from Donald Trump to Joe Biden with the Dominion machines. And we do not know, despite all of the articles that I have read, we do not know for sure at what point that happened. Did it happen at the time when the ballots were fed into the machines? Or did it happen later? Or did it happen when votes were transferred? Was it a software glitch? Was it intentional? Who knows? But that did happen in a single county in Michigan. That we do know. And so nonetheless, Dominion is suing Rudy Giuliani for defamation. And so we have CNN talking to their legal analyst. It's always so funny when CNN brings experts in. It's always dangerous too. So here's the CNN legal analyst, Ellie Honig, discussing the lawsuit. We have that clip, and here it is.
Now, Ellie, $1.3 billion. How strong does this case look to you?
It looks pretty strong to me, John. In a defamation case like this, if you're the plaintiff, if you're Dominion Voting Systems here, you have to prove two things. One, that the statements the defendant here, Rudy Giuliani, made were false. I mean, they should have very little problem proving that. These statements Rudy Giuliani made were not just false, they were wild. The second thing you have to prove is that the defendant, Rudy, either knew they were false or was sort of reckless, meaning he should have known, easily could have known, but said them anyway. Those are the legal requirements. And given the utter falsity, I think obvious falsity of what Rudy Giuliani said, I think Dominion's going to have a real shot to prove its case here.
You know, one thing that's interesting, and the Dominion lawyer points this out, they say that Giuliani never made the Dominion claims in a court of law when he would have been under oath. He only made them in public or testifying when he wasn't under oath. Why does that matter here to the point you were just making?
Yeah, it's a good point by the Dominion lawyers, because it shows that it goes to Rudy's knowledge that these were false, because if he really believed these, he would have said them in a court of law. The risk to doing that to a lawyer is you can get sanctioned by the court. You can get fined. You can get thrown out of the bar even. So I think that's a good indicator. Another interesting detail here, Rudy didn't just say something once. Sometimes in these defamation suits, it's one statement that a person said. You can argue, well, maybe they misspoke a little bit or were misunderstood. Rudy made the statements that Dominion complains about here dozens of times, up to 50 times.
So basically, Ellie Honig, CNN's legal analyst, wants to cancel Rudolph Giuliani, but never. Okay, so fine. His job is to talk about the legal aspects of this case where Dominion is suing Rudy Giuliani for defamation. Understandable and fair enough, okay? But what about the fact that the American people have never really had an opportunity on mainstream media news, and I mean all of the news outlets, perhaps, and here's what I'm talking about. What if all of the mainstream media outlets, CNN, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, Fox, OAN, One America, every single news outlet, and C-SPAN, C-SPAN, what if they all had a 2-hour-long film of what it looks like to vote in each individual swing state? Some sort of informational kind of session where it was 2 hours long. Probably that should actually occur at the United States Senate, where you investigate things and you have an opportunity. But what if in Wisconsin we were told, hey, here's how people vote in Wisconsin if you're voting in person. And then you show the fact the person fills out the ballot and they scan the ballot in. What happens on the back end in the Dominion machine, right? What happens when the vote is scanned into the machine on the back end? Are there USB drives that can be added or subtracted? Look, I don't know, right? I'm a fairly, I think, technical person, understand technology fairly well, and I still to this day haven't read a single article in the mainstream media that has explained to me how an actual Dominion machine works. But that wouldn't be even enough for me. I would want to actually see it in action to see how it works, and to have someone show us and step us through this, like one step at a time. And then here are the weaknesses of the machines. Here are potential weaknesses where potential things could happen or things could go wrong. If we had that, do you podcast listeners think for 1 minute that the American people wouldn't feel at least some sense of relief, or maybe increased skepticism, or at least there'd be a desire to fix the problems that people potentially see, where we can come together as a nation, as Republicans and Democrats, but instead as Americans, and say we need to do better than this, because there are too many possibilities of things that can go wrong when you vote in person with a Dominion machine. But we can't ever know that unless we have that mainstream media cooperation with, a couple of hours of walking us through about these machines with experts to show us how they work. And so the thing is, the idea that Dominion would sue Rudy Giuliani for defamation, fine, they can sue anybody they want, but that's not going to change the fact that 74 million Americans fundamentally don't trust what happened in many of those swing states. And the way you get that trust back and that transparency back is to talk and walk people through it step by step with an actual machine. And also show people how different states, specifically the swing states, do things differently. So my understanding is there are some states, when you scan your ballot in, what they give you is like a receipt, like, a little paper receipt that you would get perhaps from, a gas station, and say, oh, okay, well, you voted and here's how you voted, but people don't actually keep those. So, is it possible that since there's no record other than what the state election board has as the record is not, there's no check. So here's what I'm saying. There's no check and balance. And I think what people want to see is more of a check and balance system and more integrity in elections. And I think there's nothing wrong with asking that question. But CNN, of course, is not the least bit interested. So we have CNN's legal analysts again. We have another clip from Eli Honig. He's their legal analyst. And you have to listen very carefully at the end of this clip about how the CNN reporter just completely disbands all critical thinking. Listen really closely. First, you'll hear the legal analyst, and then you'll end up with the actual reporter from CNN. We have that clip, and here it is.
So the vast majority of these cases do settle because it's costly and risky for both parties to go to trial. I'm not sure Dominion's going to be in much of a settling mood here, given they've taken a very strong litigation stance, given the serious damage that's been done to the reputation. I'm not sure Rudy Giuliani is going to be able to settle for the amount of money that I think Dominion's going to require. So this one, I put this in the small group of the small category of cases that I think have a real shot to end up at trial.
They have every reason to push this until the very end here. Rudy Giuliani could be in some serious financial trouble this morning.
So you hear CNN, like they're putting their foot on the scale. The reporter is at CNN. He's putting his foot on the scale of, Dominion has every reason to make sure that they take everything from Rudolph Giuliani, a man that is an American hero from 9/11, right, from 9/11. But CNN doesn't care about that, because Rudolph Giuliani supports Donald Trump, a fellow New Yorker. CNN wants to make sure that he is just ruined. He's ruined financially. his ruin personally, and maybe even who knows what, right? That I'm sure they would love to see him locked up. And you hear that in their own words, these reporters, without even ever along the way asking any of the questions that I just asked prior to you hearing that clip, which is, hey, why don't we actually have a 2-hour-long program at CNN to walk people through how these machines work to really see if there are holes or problems with the system? Never. You'll never see that with CNN, which is why we have a nation so divided about this election, and it's not going to change until these news outlets try to fix this and actually do critical thinking reporting. And that is Dominion sues Rudy Giuliani for defamation. So next up, podcast listeners, we have some funny stuff here. The Bernie Sanders meme. So yes, Bernie Sanders was at the inauguration of President Biden and Kamala Harris. And when, of course, Biden was being sworn in, Bernie was like kind of very isolated, it seemed, versus everybody else, sitting in a chair with his two really humongous mittens, right? Not gloves, but actual mittens, and then they were knit mittens. And they looked actually pretty warm and kind of like very Vermonty, like hippie-ish Vermonty, quite frankly. You know, it's like exactly looked like something like, I'm gonna move to Vermont, I'm gonna buy mittens, or I'm gonna open up a mitten company. Well, Bernie, of course, has them. And I have to admit, they're kind of cool looking. And so we have CNN's Dana Bash asking Bernie Sanders about his meme. And so why does that matter? Well, of course, because Bernie was kind of sitting alone with these huge mittens, there were memes that went viral all over the country. And that people would insert Bernie, who was sitting in his chair with his memes, his gloves, his massive mittens, and they would insert the meme in all kinds of different pictures. And so CNN's Dana Bash asked Bernie Sanders about this. And we have that clip, and here it is.
One of the things that has seemed to have been a distraction from the pain you're talking about is you on the internet over the past week. The fact that you have become a meme, the picture of you sitting at the inauguration in your mittens. Thousands of memes. That's just some of them on the screen. I have to show you some of my personal favorites. Demi Moore, she put your picture in her famous ghost scene. Jennifer Grey, you know, she played Baby in Dirty Dancing. She put you in the corner, Senator. And, you know, you're even a selfie with us on election night. So my question is, are you having as much fun with this as the world is?
I am. And not only are we having fun, what we're doing here in Vermont is we're going to be selling around the country sweatshirts and T-shirts, and all of the money that's going to be raised, which I expect will be $2 million, will be going to programs like Meals on Wheels that feed low-income senior citizens. So
that's Bernie Sanders responding to his infamous picture and now meme that is everywhere. And here's a news story from ABC 57. I'm going to read this one. Woman who made Bernie Sanders mittens says she has no more to sell. So apparently she's had a huge demand for these mittens. Everybody's like trying to find out, where do I buy these mittens? Well, she's out. So the Vermont school teacher behind the cozy mittens worn by Bernie Sanders during President Joe Biden's inauguration on Wednesday said she's been flooded with requests from people wanting to buy a pair, but they're no longer for sale. That's for all the interest in Bernie Sanders. She said, thanks for all the interest in Bernie Sanders mittens. That was Jen Ellis. That's what she wrote on Twitter, who owns the company. I'm so flattered that Bernie wore them to the inauguration. Sadly, I have no more mittens for sale. There are a lot of great crafters on Etsy who make them. I mean, she's basically sending people somewhere else. I mean, it's not very bright, right? If it were me, I'd like try to scale up and try to make as many of these mittens as possible and sell them. A few years ago, Ellis, who teaches second grade, gave the Vermont senator the patterned hand-knit smittens, as she calls them, part mittens and part sweater on the campaign trail. But she didn't expect he'd start wearing them at high-profile events like the inauguration. The mittens are made from repurposed wool sweaters, and no wonder she ran out of them, and it's not enough material, and lined with fleece made from recycled plastic bottles, she said in a tweet last year. Oh my God. So they're an iconic accessory in the grumpy chic meme of Sanders, sitting with his arms crossed in a puffy jacket and blue mask. Across social media this week, Sanders has been photoshopped onto the Game of Thrones throne, transported into historical photographs, shrunken down to fit onto former First Lady Melania Trump's dress, and seen outside your doorstep via a new app that uses Google Maps. The image is also being sold on t-shirts, mugs, and a $25 bobblehead. Some sellers on Etsy are already touting Bernie Sanders-inspired mittens. Last year, online merchants crashed in on the fly that buzzed on former Vice President Mike Pence during the debate against Kamala Harris. The Biden campaign sold more than 35,000 fly swatters with the slogan, "Truth over flies," a play on the campaign slogan, "Truth over lies." So that's part of the article from ABC 57. So if that's not enough, Late Night's Seth Meyers, who was interviewing Sanders also about the memes, and we have this clip. It's pretty funny, and here it is.
Who was incredible. You were sort of one of the stars of the inauguration. Were you aware that this photo was immediately sort of became the meme of the day?
Not at all. I was just sitting there trying to keep warm, trying to pay attention to what was going on.
I appreciate that you're not a politician who uses memes, but you became one. I mean, do you? Does your staff show them to you? Here you are with the Sex and the City girls.
Yeah, I've seen them.
The other question.
What was really nice, Seth, is the woman who made the mittens lives in Essex Junction, Vermont. She is a school teacher, and is a very, very nice person, and she has been somewhat overwhelmed by the kind of attention that is being shown to her.
In which case, she should definitely cash in, but apparently she's not. So my favorite Bernie Sanders memes with the mittens, where he's sitting in Wayne's World, Wayne's World from Saturday Night Live. Another one of my favorites, he's sitting with the Bachelor. In The Bachelor, he's sitting on the couch with all the people in The Bachelor. Kind of funny thinking of Bernie as a bachelor because he was like the winner of The Bachelor. That's what it made it look like. Another it's the Bernie Sanders meme as the fly on Mike Pence's head during the debate with Kamala Harris. And my personal favorite, drum roll for that would be, you remember when Michael Jackson was holding his infant son over the balcony, which was, of course, incredibly stupid and dangerous? Well, there's a meme of Michael Jackson doing the same thing, but he's holding Bernie Sanders, the Bernie Sanders meme, over the balcony as if he's going to potentially drop Bernie Sanders. And so we actually think that's really funny because as far as memes go, that is, without question, 2021's best meme. But we have another idea for a meme, and we're hoping maybe you can send us some ideas via email, or you're even welcome to post them if you want on social media. But keep it classy, of course. It's hard to with this particular one because without question, 2021's best gaffe so far, and I don't see how this can be outdone in 2021. Although with Joe Biden as president, anything is possible. Well, 2021's best gaffe so far, which also would make a great meme, is when Chuck Schumer went to the Senate floor and talked about how important it was to have an impeachment trial to remove Donald Trump from office, who's already not in office, of course. And Chuck Schumer makes a gaffe, a mistake that is just unthinkable and unimaginable. I mean, what an idiot. And the funny thing is if you watch this really closely, after he says the infamous word and makes the gaffe, he literally turns his head like this. He goes, he realizes oh my gosh, I've made an incredibly dumb and awful mistake. How do I walk that back? Too late, you already said it, and it is out there in the Ethernet forever. So we have that clip, and here it is.
Make no mistake, there will be a trial, and when that trial ends, senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the insurrection against the United States.
So, of course, after he said the word, his head went literally oh my gosh, did I really say that? And so I'm waiting for, some memes to go out there with Chuck Schumer. I haven't seen them yet. I suspect that could be, could be coming down the future. And that is Bernie Sanders meme. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. A special thanks to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, hopefully soon Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.